Are you watching us? Can you see if we're live?
I'm trying. I'm not seeing it. Let's see. It says upcoming still. Waiting for the pleasure program.
Okay. Was I supposed to do something on YouTube too? Oh wait, we're live. I see us.
You do.
I do.
Where are you seeing us?
Under our subscriptions on my phone.
Oh.
I think we're live. Yeah, it says we're live right now.
Great. All right. Well, I can't see us, so
that's weird. You're on our page on YouTube.
Yeah, Maybe it's because I'm not subscribed. Can only subscribed people see it? I'm gonna subscribe.
Well, I think the bigger question here, Victoria, is why are you not subscribed to our own YouTube channel?
Oh gosh, is that gonna highlight how tech savvy we are?
Probably, and that's okay. We are normal people here.
Oh, here we go. Now it's saying live. Maybe that was
it. You subscribed? Interesting.
I don't know. Maybe it was just also my internet. Maybe we were far behind. Who knows?
Either way, it's working. Okay. Well, welcome to the Pleasure Program. My name is Holly.
I'm Victoria.
We are two licensed therapists who specialize in sex therapy. We are here to share our knowledge and educate you all, answer questions you have pertaining to all things related to sex. Take a look at our disclaimer in the description box. Please note that our live stream is for entertainment and education purposes only and is not a substitute for any individualized treatment. Also, this is for mature audiences, so take note of that. We are discussing sexual content in our live stream.
Yeah.
Okay.
Speaking of that, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, we should probably explain. I don't know if any of our subscribers here on YouTube are from Twitch or just specific to YouTube, but we did decide to make the transition from live streaming on Twitch over to YouTube. I think we were feeling like maybe, we're getting more engagement over here. Perhaps there's more of an audience for our content here, and maybe we fit in a little bit better over here on YouTube.
Yeah, and if people are looking for educational videos, I guess you don't really think of them going to Twitch. You think of them going to YouTube. So
that's true.
Probably reaching the population better that we want to reach.
I think that you're probably right about that. We shall see. We're still very green in all of this, really green. In fact, we are working on the thumbnails and timestamps. We've taken a couple weeks off and we've been working on that. So hopefully that helps people navigate our videos a little bit better. And we're trying to make the thumbnails more appropriate because we realize that there are some really inappropriate looking thumbnails. And what I mean by that is we have like a video on porn addiction and we look like we're laughing hysterically in the thumbnail, or like erectile
like we're
dysfunction.
Not taking it seriously. That we're just making fun of it or something.
And so for anyone who doesn't know, when you like upload a video on YouTube, they will automatically give you like 3 options of a thumbnail like snapshot from the video that you can use if you don't have your own, which up until recently we didn't really have our own. So I just, picked whatever one looked like the most normal, and it was always us laughing at every topic. So hopefully people are appreciating the new thumbnails.
But I do think, right, if it's giving you 3 options and we're laughing in them, we laugh a lot. Like we're not making fun of anything, but I think we enjoy chatting with each other.
That's true. I know I do. So, yeah.
All right. So today we're talking about BDSM. So awesome. Let's take it away. So I think what we should start with first is kink. We had talked a little bit about kink. You should check out our fetish video if you have not yet, because kink is kind of the overarching umbrella term for things that are non-normative, that are erotic or intimate, such as behaviors or fantasies, relationships, that kind of thing. So a lot can fall underneath that umbrella term, and BDSM is something that falls underneath that. And I think sometimes people use them interchangeably, which is okay. You know, if they're talking about BDSM, they might be talking about kink and vice versa. People might be not even knowing that they're engaging in BDSM practices and calling it kink, and that's okay too. But just for a little bit of extra information, one thing that I kind of want to highlight right off the bat is that there's a big misconception about kink. Holly, have you ever heard when people hear about kink that might not be familiar with it, them thinking that it's related to trauma or related to some sort of mental health diagnosis or mental disorder?
You know, I have heard that. And I guess whenever I've heard that, I don't think too much of it, because maybe it's just from the knowledge we have, our backgrounds, that I think I've always been very curious. I'm really curious about this topic. And I feel like we should probably say we're not like experts in the kink community by any means. Like, we're kind of giving some basic information for anyone who just wants the basics, right? So by no means are we like the almighty knowers of everything kink related, but I have heard that, and they sound like misconceptions to me. So I'm curious to debunk some of those. I feel like that's what's on the agenda tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I wanted to start off with that, because I want to just normalize kink a little bit and demystify that. So have you heard of like the ACE study, or Adverse Childhood Experiences study?
Yes.
Okay.
I said that with a weird tone. Yes.
I love it.
We'll just leave it. We'll just leave it at that. Well, okay. The reason why I paused for a second there is because my understanding is that the term ace also is related to people who I identify as asexual. So for a second I got confused, and then I like reoriented my mind. So there's another acronym for ACE.
Yes, totally fair. That's a really good clarifier. So there are adverse childhood experiences that unfortunately people go through, such as like neglect or abuse. And there's a survey that asks people what they've experienced that was adverse in their childhood. And the average score is 15.8% of the population have a high score, is what I mean. Sorry, not the average score. But in the population in the United States, around 16% have a high score. Okay. And when they've studied the kink community, their percentage of their population with a high score is only 10%. So if anything, you know, people say that kink is a result of trauma. Kink is a result of abuse. And if anything, the research actually shows that not to be true. You know, and if anyone's wondering, that's from Merrick et al. In 2018. I know people love
I can't wait. I cannot wait to get a clip of that and post that on YouTube and just see it light up, because anytime you're trying to like debunk a myth, Victoria, people go a little wild, it seems.
People do not like when you're debunking something. If they're committed to a myth, if you have research to share, they have a hard time. They have a hard time believing it, and you know, I get it. So if you have any questions, I'm not going to follow up every fact with the source.
Hopefully not, because that would be a very long, boring live stream. But they're all in the description box. I linked every source in our description box, so if you're curious about where the information's coming from. And to be fair, we had a lot of really positive, supportive comments from viewers in that short. If anyone knows what we're referring to, I don't know if we got any subscribers from your one spicy short.
Yes,
but
we're debunking polyamory myths.
So that's what we do here, debunk.
Okay, so starting off with that misconception and just getting that out of the way, let's dive in a little bit to BDSM. BDSM is an acronym that stands for a few different things within it. It used to just be S&M, and then it expanded. So the first section is bondage and discipline for the B and D. And so that's involving the use of restraints or sensation play, such as pain or other stimulation, and punishment.
Mm.
Any like thoughts or questions about bondage or discipline as the first section?
Not appropriate ones. I'm just trying to behave.
I love it. Okay, and then the bondage and the discipline can highlight the power dynamic of dominance and submission, which is the next portion. And so this is dynamics in a relationship or a situationship, partnership, whatever you want to call it, dynamics that involve psychological or physical control, giving or receiving, complying with demands. So if you're engaging in the dominance aspect, you're giving those demands, and if you are a submissive, you are complying with those demands.
Gotcha. Okay, so we're at the BD still, or are we on to the SM part?
So, bondage and discipline, that was the BD, and then dominance and submission, that's DS.
Okay.
BDS. So yes.
I was like, why do I feel like there's an extra letter in there? I'm like, okay.
Because we haven't gotten to the M yet.
Gotcha.
I think that's what's tripping you up.
It was. There was like 2 Ds in there.
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
bondage, discipline, dominance.
In our talking, there was 2 Ds, but BDSM only has 1 D in the acronym.
Right. No, I got that. There was just like 2 D words.
Oh, yes. So then 2 S words, the submission, and then we're going into sadism. Sadism and masochism, which is the next portion. And so that is like the interest or the enjoyment of inflicting or receiving pain or intense sensations. So if you are interested in sadism, you're interested in providing those sensations. And then if you're interested in masochism, you're interested in receiving those.
Okay. And do those go hand in hand with the dominant and submission?
They can.
Okay.
So sometimes people who are dominant, they may enjoy providing pain or intense sensations, but it doesn't necessarily have to go hand in hand. Sometimes they do. Sometimes these things are not even sexual. So a term I've heard is BDSM is always relational and sometimes sexual. Sometimes people engage in this kind of dynamic where it's a 24/7 thing and they are kind of constantly complying or giving demands. So it might be, drink 8 ounces of water by 8 a.m. That's not sexual necessarily, right? That's not sadistic or masochistic. It's just relational.
Okay. Yeah.
And any questions?
No.
You look like you had a thought.
Well, I find it very interesting. So basically you could have like a dominant and submissive type of dynamic between 2 partners, and that could either happen through the context of a 24/7 relationship, or it could be like for periods of time, like we're going to sort of play with this dynamic for an evening or something like that.
Exactly. Yep.
And it's not necessarily always sexual. It's relational.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. And so you were just talking about ace earlier, people who identify as asexual, they're part of this community too, right? And so they could be really enjoying the relational aspect of it.
Wow, that is really interesting. I think that is a misconception, and probably one that I had, that like this is mostly around sexual arousal and not just about a lifestyle, sort of.
Yeah, absolutely. Like a lifestyle and a community. Absolutely. And recently I've heard too, I haven't seen it a lot, I've only seen it in 1 or 2 places, but they've added, or some people have added, slave and master for SM as well.
Oh, okay.
And that's just more on the intense end of submission and dominance. That would be more 24/7. A slave is extremely submissive and always complying, and a master is always engaging in dominance 24/7. And yields maybe more control in more areas of life than a dominant might.
So if they were using those terms, it would probably imply that that's more of a 24/7 lifestyle relationship dynamic. Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's kind of what BDSM stands for. One of the things when you learn about what BDSM stands for, one of the misconceptions is that BDSM is abusive, right? Because you're hearing about discipline, or you're hearing about sadism, dominance, right? And so there's this misconception that, like, why are we promoting this? This is abusive. But since the 1980s, the BDSM community has worked really, really hard to distinguish BDSM from any sexual coercion or assault or anything that's been abusive. And so there's been a lot of acronyms to help promote ethics in BDSM to show kind of, the vanilla community, outside of BDSM, that they are safe and ethical. And so let's start with like the oldest, which is safe, sane, and consensual, so SSC. So this was the very first acronym that the BDSM community came out with to highlight their ethics. So safe, they were saying, like, this isn't just a way that we can inflict injury whatever way you please. BDSM practitioners know what they're doing. They educate themselves. They completely avoid any unintentional, non-consensual harm. That's what they mean by it's safe.
Okay.
And then sane. Did you ever hear, like, have a safe and sane 4th of July?
No, it sounds really exciting. Have a safe and sane 4th of July?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's like this old school kind of just saying of just like, be safe and be smart and like setting off fireworks, right? And so this might be a play off of that, I've heard. So it's just like, it's sane, it's controlled, there's good communication around it, which is completely different than anything that would be abusive.
Should we, I don't know if you're planning on talking about this, Victoria, should we talk about what is abusive, just to kind of make the distinction there?
We can, yeah.
I mean, so the biggest difference here being consent, right?
Yes, that was the next thing. That was the C of the SSC.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm like interrupting your whole acronym. Okay, finish the acronym.
I thought you were going into like, what does abuse look like? That's why I was like, we can go into that.
We can, but finish your acronym first, and then we can maybe like be like, but this is what abuse is, so that people can kind of know the difference. Yeah.
Absolutely. So consent. So if you go back into our previous streams, Holly, you had a great definition of consent, right? It's like everyone's excited to be there. I think you had said no one's coerced to be there. Everyone's excited to be there. I loved it, right? So it's like consent is agreement about something, to do something that is completely freely given, right? Like not pressured, not coerced. They're fully informed. They're knowing that where, what, when, where, how, why, all of that, right? And it's, is there anything else that you want to add about that? I'm trying to think.
I'm trying to remember the definition. I think it was everyone's glad to be there and free to leave without any unwanted consequence or unwanted pain.
That's what I was missing. I was like, what was that? It was the consequence. Yes. Yes. So that is consent. And consent is really the foundation of BDSM. Yeah. They always talk about like negotiations. They're talking about limits. They're talking about risks. They're talking about expectations. Like everything is fully gone through. They are the expert sexual communicators.
Yeah. I've always believed we have a lot to learn from that community. One of our last streams was all about how to talk to your partner about sex and like the best communication methods to do that. And because so many people struggle with just talking about it, think about how much communication has to go into these boundaries and negotiations and expectations that these individuals are making with one another to have these experiences or live this type of relational lifestyle. You really have to discuss a lot in a lot of detail. Absolutely. A lot of people are very uncomfortable with that.
Yeah. Yep. So, as you were saying, right, BDSM, safe, sane, consensual. If it's abusive, it's not going to be safe. Right?
Right.
It's not going to be well thought out or in a controlled environment, which is sane. It's not going to be consensual, right? That's what makes it abusive, is when you are not consenting to it. not
Right.
well informed, all of that. You want to,
Yeah,
yeah, go
like
ahead.
abuse tactics, what is abusive in relationships is, controlling and manipulating somebody else without there being, yeah, any consent involved in that. It's harmful to the other person. There's, verbal abuse and psychological abuse. There's control of financial resources and isolating somebody, interfering with their other friends and family and their relationships. And of course, there's physical abuse, but all the big, mediating difference there, the major one, there's a lot of differences, but is that consent piece, right? We're talking about two people that are agreeing to have these interactions with each other versus one person taking charge and control against somebody who is not willing and feels like they have little to no choice.
Right. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And clearly, like, that is not what is being said from the BDSM community. Mm-hmm. Right.
Right.
So they're so ethical that there's literally been numerous acronyms since SSC because there's debate within the community on like whether or not each acronym is a good enough acronym.
Wow, so, they like their acronyms. I don't know that I can retain another acronym.
It's okay. I think the big one is from our title, Risk-Aware Consensual Kink. Like that had evolved from SSC because the BDSM community was like, who's to say like safe can be subjective, like it's not clear enough. There is risk involved, and we want to make sure that like everyone's aware of the risk and who's responsible for keeping it safe. So it's like risk-aware consensual kink, meaning if you're partaking, and agreeing and consenting, you're aware that there could be risk. This is completely consensual risk, and it's kink, right?
I love that. That's one that makes a lot of sense. I mean, and not to say that somebody who is abusive could not be in this community or not be doing, sort of using this as a disguise to their abuse, but it's not widespread, and it is frowned upon and obviously discouraged within the kink community. So, it can happen. It's not like, oh, if you enter this community, you are never going to experience any form of abuse. People are people in every community and are capable of being abusive in any community, but they're trying to be very conscientious and safe and aware of those risks here and have everybody be a willing participant in every way they can be, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can I just pause for 1 second and
just pause.
Say, if we have people watching right now, like I'm new to the YouTube live stream. If you wouldn't mind jumping in the chat and saying hi, maybe just like introduce yourself just so we know it's working. Because I also, I don't see anywhere on here that tells me like how many people are viewing. I don't know why that's not a thing here compared to when we were streaming on Twitch. So that might be.
I'm seeing 3 are watching now.
Oh, you can see.
Yep.
Okay.
It's underneath our live stream on our page.
Wow.
So hello, whoever is watching, please feel
please
free
just
to jump
say hi. And we would love to just make sure that's working and also have an opportunity to say hello.
Yeah.
Okay. Continue on.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about popularity of BDSM. How are you feeling? Are you feeling like it's pretty popular and pervasive? Are you feeling like not so much? What would be your assumption?
I really have no concept of that.
Yeah.
I mean, in the context of being a sex therapist, when I hear about it, it's usually like certain relationships, some of these elements were explored and experimented with. I don't know that I've had a lot of interaction with people that are very engaged in the community on a very consistent basis. So I don't think I have a good read on that.
Yeah, that's totally fair. So from what research has found, it looks like about 50 to 60% of people in the general population report having fantasies that involve aspects of dominance and submission.
There was like a trick there. You're like 50 to 60%. And I'm like, what? And then have fantasies of, okay.
Well, that's technically still BDSM, right?
Just having the fantasy?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, that is kink, right? That is BDSM. Fantasy can be part of that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Fair enough.
Before having fantasies of it. You're like, that's garbage. I don't like that statistic.
Lies.
Lies. And then 30% have fantasies involving whipping or spanking.
Okay. 30 to 40 is whipping, spanking. 50 to 60 is some sort of dominant, submissive dynamic.
Yeah, and that's fantasies. And so you wanted to look at behavior. You were like,
well, I thought that's where we were going. But the fantasy makes sense. Yeah.
That makes sense. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So if we're looking at actual action, looks like about 20% of the population have engaged in bondage in their sexual behavior, 30% engaged in spanking, and 15% roughly playfully whipped or been whipped over the course of their lifetime. So,
I mean, that sounds very light. That sounds like a barely, like a vanilla trying to be a BDSM. It sounds like just a sprinkle of it.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I guess it's bondage, so I guess we have no idea what level of bondage is there, right? And being whipped, we don't know the level of that either. I can see where you're coming from spanking, because spanking seems like it's becoming more normative. I don't know.
Maybe like these percentages seem high and some of those behaviors seem like a vanilla person could maybe experiment with some of those behaviors and not consider themselves in the community. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess when you first asked, I was thinking about the people in the community. Like, this is like their lifestyle, they're living this way with a partner consistently participating. I mean, I don't know, do we have numbers on those individuals, or it's just harder to come by?
I'm sure it's harder to come by. I think that researching any of these numbers are probably very difficult in terms of because of shame or stigma or fear as well.
Right. That makes sense.
That's the problem with research. It's not entirely accurate because there are so many barriers.
And someone has to care. Not that I'm saying people don't care, but like, I feel like a lot of research is funded for a purpose.
Exactly.
We're trying to learn something for a reason, for some sort of marketing or some sort of something being sold. So I think that's why we're lacking in a lot of research on particular topics too.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. So we should talk about some terminology, because we were talking about acronyms. We were talking about...
There's more.
There's so much. There is. And this is just basics, So there's a lot of words that are really normalized in the community that if you're thinking about maybe dipping your toes in the water and seeing what the community is about, these might be important for you to know. Mm-hmm. So a scene is what we'll start with. So a scene is a time frame of consensual BDSM activity. It doesn't have to be sex, but it's pre-planned. So it might be like, all right, we're going to engage in this dom-sub dynamic tonight, and that might be around dinner, or it might be around sex. But it doesn't have to be sex. But a scene is just the pre-planned negotiation. These are the expectations. These are the limits. This is the contract, per se.
Okay. Scene.
And then is scene, yeah. And then play. Play indicates that's just BDSM acts, right? That could be spanking, that could be bondage, that could be anything like that, flogging.
And some of those behaviors can get risky. I don't know if you were going to talk about how risky, like some people do piercings or cutting. There's no, we're not suggesting people do this. Again, we are not experts in kink, so we're not saying go start cutting your partner tonight and participating in blood play or anything like that, but it's a thing.
This video just got banned on YouTube. Were
you not going to go there?
I'm Holly is like, all right, we're getting into blood play.
Okay, well, sorry, YouTube. Sorry, I'll have to go back and bleep myself out. But yeah, I know. I'm pretty sure our fetish one's probably not gonna earn us anything here.
Okay.
Anyway, but okay, I was just saying we were talking about some of this stuff gets kind of intense.
It's so funny. I kind of knew that you were going to go there for some reason. Sometimes we're just like on the same wavelength, and I was like, it's coming.
You're like,
and
Holly's going to bring up blood at any
I
moment.
was just being like a band.
The whole computer just like shuts down and it's like, we're done.
Well, where I thought you were maybe going to is what's been really normalized that will, maybe not normalized, but more in popular media recently, is choking or breath pet play, which we won't get into because that is very risky and not appropriate, I think, for basics, even though people...
We're here to talk about the basics and the safest options to consider.
Like we're thinking people who are interested in what BDSM might mean, maybe read some 50 Shades of Grey, and it's like, I want to learn more about this because that was very popular. And that's where we're at right now. We're happy to come back with the
part two.
More advanced BDSM. Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Okay, so we talked about different types of play, right? So there could be a play party where is a BDSM gathering where play occurs, whatever that looks like.
Scenes happening with play.
Yeah.
Am I using these words correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. And then what you might hear too that might get confusing if you're new to this and you're wanting to learn basics is there's also what we call munches. So that's another gathering, but that BDSM acts aren't occurring there. That's like get to know you, like luncheon. It's just like, it's just going out and meeting people in the community. It could be doing something fun like bowling. It could be just meeting at a local restaurant, but it's not meant to have a scene that's sexual or anything like that. A munch is actually probably your first step in getting into the community because BDSM wants to keep their community safe. And so, you know, oftentimes you might need a reference to go to a play party with other people. Yeah. If you're wanting to engage in BDSM with more people or people outside of just like a partner or something, you're probably going to need a reference for that, which you can get at a munch.
I'm just noticing we did have a chat pop in. I don't know why I missed it, but hi, Soprano. Thank you for saying hi, and thanks for the love.
Ah, hello. I pause because I can tell when you're reading. I'm like, all right.
It just snuck up on me. I don't know if it was supposed to, like, I was so engaged in what you were saying, Victoria, that I totally missed that chat pop in. So I don't know how long it's been there, but sorry if I did not notice it and it had been sitting there for a while.
Okay, so that's a munch. Your first step, you're going to want, a reference from that. Also, it's great for you to just meet other people. You can meet people more seasoned in the community that you can ask questions to, get to know, and feel more comfortable, that kind of thing. If you're curious about how to find a munch, there's something called FetLife. Have you heard of FetLife?
I have heard that, yeah.
It's basically like a Facebook for the kinky community.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Love it. They have forums on there, kind of like Reddit, where people can ask questions and have answers, or you can friend people like Facebook. They'll put out different events like munches. It's a great opportunity to get your feet in the water if you're interested.
I think that's great. You know, anytime you're considering trying something new and different, you're not totally sure, it's like surveying people, like asking questions, meeting people, being curious about it, and see what that feels like to get all that information.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. There's also a dungeon you might hear. Like, that's why I want to clarify some of these terms, because they sound kind of familiar, like a play party, a dungeon, a munch. but a dungeon is just the location that is happening. So you might go to a munch in a dungeon, right? Like, you might go to a play party in a dungeon. Does that make sense?
So a dungeon could be anywhere. Is that what you're saying?
It could be anywhere. It's just
Okay.
where it could be your bedroom. It could be an Airbnb with other people at a play party, you know?
They really know how to make things sound very, like, dramatic, right?
I love it.
It's like the kitchen. They're like, welcome to the dungeon.
Yeah, absolutely. They're making the scene, like, exciting, right? I love it. Okay. And then also, we had touched a little bit on vanilla. That's not meant to be derogatory. So if there's anyone watching that's
except when I
vanilla,
say it, it's meant to be derogatory.
It's just
kidding.
a descriptor of people who are not interested in kink and BDSM, and that's okay.
What about people that are like 1 foot in the door? And are they considered kink? If you're like, I'm vanilla, but I like the occasional spanking or something, or, you know, what is there a term for those people?
I think that can still be considered kinky, right? Because kink is anything that's like not normative. So it also depends on. I'm sure people debate over whether or not spanking is kinky, because is it normative? Is it not normative? Right? That's subjective. That's what's hard.
Is the kink community consider themselves not normative? Like
that?
Yeah. So if you're vanilla in every other, you're not using terms like dungeon and munch and play scenes, that if you're spanking or doing a little bit of light bondage, you're not really one of us.
I don't know. I don't think so.
I expected you to have every answer.
I think just like any community, there's probably people that are so welcoming, like, yeah, try a little bit, and then you're going to get hooked and want more. And there's probably people that are a little bit more judgmental, just like any community, right? Like, we have people on the spectrum that are welcoming and warm, and people that are judgmental. Even a therapist, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right?
People are people in every community.
People are people. So one big thing to know is a safe word or a safe gesture. So if you're getting into the community or you're getting into BDSM with a partner, if you're starting to engage in any sort of BDSM acts, you're going to want a safe word. That's going to be part of your negotiation, your contract, your agreement, whatever you want to call it. A common one is just red, because it's like the light system, like red, orange, or yellow, green.
Like stop.
Stop. Yep. You can use no, you can use red. Red is extremely common. If you go to a play party and you say red or you say safe word, there will be other people there that are like, oh, okay, like, we're keeping an eye on them. Like, we know that they just set a boundary. So that's important to know. It's important to have gestures if you're doing things that might inhibit your ability to speak.
Okay.
So keeping all of that, communicating that with whoever you're playing with, what will the gesture be? And making sure that can be easily seen.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Just more safety.
Yeah. Any questions about any like terms or anything?
No, any questions in the chat? Anybody curious to hear more? Sorry, I have an itchy nose.
I don't think you have to apologize.
It's like really itchy. I just got like super itchy. Of course, now my eyes are watering.
And obviously there's more terms, but this is just, I think, the basic foundational.
Like, now I look like Rudolph. We're live. Any questions from any viewers on any clarification with any of the terminology? Anybody here identify in the kink community? Anyone identify as vanilla? Anyone kink curious? Is that a term, or am I just making that up?
I love that. I'm not sure.
Anybody vanilla with a side of kink? A sprinkle of kink.
A sprinkle of kink. I love this.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. Okay, so getting into some different roles in BDSM, we kind of covered a bit of like dominant or submissive. So dominant. There's also master. They're very similar, like we talked about. They're kind of on the same realm of you being the dominant one. You're driving the bus. You're leading in a scene. You're giving commands. You're probably inflicting punishment, or you're inflicting sensation. You provide the structure and you maintain the boundaries. That's you're the one really responsible for safety, and it can happen that someone who is dominant uses a safe word. We think of a submissive using a safe word, but sometimes being in the dominant position can be overwhelming mentally or physically, and they may safe word at times, and that's totally normal. So just to know, right?
Anyone can use it. Yep.
Anyone can use it. Yep. They can also sometimes be called a top. And then we talked about submissive, right? They're receiving things. You think of them using the safe word when you think of safe word, but not always, right? They're complying. They can also be called a bottom. Okay. Right, or a slave, depending, like we had talked about. Another term to keep in mind for a submissive could be a brat. A brat, yep. So a brat is someone that's a submissive, but they're playfully defiant, right?
Oh,
so
that sounds
a submissive, fun. Yeah, a submissive. Holly, you're like, that's up my alley. So a dom might give them a command, and they might be like, spicy. No. Right, no. I don't feel like what are you going to do about it, right? Like they invite the discipline, they invite the punishment, they like the playful banter. So that's another role. And then there's a switch. So a switch is someone who sometimes they want to be dominant and sometimes they want to be submissive. Sometimes they might be a brat, right? It might depend on their partner. Like if they're having multiple partners, it may depend on the scene or the dungeon, but they're flexible.
And I'm picturing a dungeon, which is like someone's house, and different scenes happening all in different areas. And are people like observing this, or is everyone participating? Like, what's that? Like, are people just kind of there as an observer?
I think that if they're there as an observer, that is part of the negotiation and the setup of the scene. Okay. Right, like it's very clear that everything is like negotiated. There are some, it depends on the dynamic. There are some dynamics where you are laying out everything that you are consenting to, or there are some dynamics where you're only laying out the things that you don't consent to, depending. But everything is negotiated beforehand.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. That's why I say they're expert sexual communicators.
Yeah.
Right. They're literally talking about everything beforehand. And then there's something called aftercare, which they talk about aftercare as well, meaning usually during aftercare there might be some sort of debriefing. If a safe word was used, why, what happened, how are you feeling? Or even if it wasn't used, how are you feeling? How did that go? What can I do for you? That can be part of the negotiation too of, okay, in aftercare, what do you think you might want? Are you going to want a lot of cuddles? You're going to want some space? You want me to grab you your favorite book and a tea? Like, what are you needing? So they're communicating before, potentially during, and after.
Wow. And what is the intention of the aftercare? Is that to obviously debrief like how it went and how it felt, but in case there is like a physical need there, like if there was somebody's inflicting some sort of pain on another person, and maybe they need like an ice pack or some Advil or something like that?
Yeah, maybe there's part of that. I think the main reason that aftercare exists is because there's things called subspace or top space, and there is some evidence and a lot of self-report that when you're engaging in these scenes, you can actually have this like alternative experience. I'm trying to find the words where it's almost like you're floating and it's really nice, or sometimes like that's because it's like a rush of endorphins and dopamine, and then after the scene is done, there's a crash. So sometimes there's a bit of like sub-depression after a scene because of that endorphin crash. And then sometimes with the person topping or dominating, they have a crash too, because sometimes they need that reassurance that what they were doing, like the sub was enjoying, or
Mm-hmm.
it was just really intense physically or emotionally for them. These scenes or these acts, these ways of playing can bring out a lot of intense feelings and emotions.
Yeah, it sounds very intense, and that there would be
Yeah.
like a sort of the aftermath of that. There would
Yeah.
be an emotional reaction to
Yeah.
having such an intense experience, right?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. I feel like everyone should take this from BDSM and talk about aftercare. I don't think aftercare should just be for BDSM scenes,
Mm.
right? Like there is oftentimes some sort of emotional response
Mm-hmm.
to a sexual activity or encounter,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so why aren't we talking about what we need afterwards, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, depending on the context and like checking in with somebody that you just had a very like intimate, vulnerable experience with. How are they feeling? What do they need? How was that for you? Is there anything you would like to do differently or better next time? And like just having that check in is such a simple concept, yet would go such a long ways, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think so too. So, any other questions about aftercare? I thought that was a great question.
I'm glad you liked it.
Well, it was a good clarifier. It's like, are they needing physical things, like to
Mm-hmm.
help with recovery about anything? Or are they needing emotional things? That makes sense. So, some common types of play that BDSM practitioners engage in,
Mm-hmm.
a lot I do feel like are becoming more and more normative, and you correct me if you think differently, right? But one is bondage. I think it is becoming more common for people to engage in handcuffs,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
That's like everywhere, being
Mm-hmm.
tied up, being restrained. Like, I feel like that is becoming more and more popular.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's what's interesting is like how much of this is truly from the kink community or from something someone's witnessed through porn or something
Yep.
they've heard about or something they read about. And so maybe that's part of the some of these becoming more normative is you're seeing it in more places and then people are
Yeah.
trying things out and incorporating them into their own sex lives when they're not even having any understanding of any of the rest of this information and these concepts, like what all these acronyms
Right.
mean, and that this could be more of a relationship dynamic and a lifestyle than just a
Yeah.
sexual experience or something you can incorporate
Yeah.
into a sexual experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I feel like 50 Shades of Grey, that series, really brought this out. I feel like this kind of thing, like the bondage, has spiked since then.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a lot of controversy over the 50 Shades of Grey. I think.
Ooh, what's the controversy?
Let's get into. Yeah,
Are we going to talk about it?
I know a few aspects. I'm sure that there's more. But one is that Christian Grey, who is the dominant in the book, they portray him as kind of, it seems like they portray him as having this kink and being interested in BDSM because of an abusive past. So it's feeding into the misconception that kink and being dominant is in relation to his abusive past, and it can be like that for other people. There's that, and then other people see it as he took advantage of this very naive, like infatuated girl. Like he saw that she was infatuated with him and that she was naive and didn't really know, slapped a negotiation like contract in front of her and basically said sign it, and like she had no idea what she was getting into really, right? Like not a lot of education there, not really a lot of talk about it or bringing her into the community. It's just like, I'm going to isolate you, you sign this, know nothing about the community outside of this, and let's do this.
I think that's a really fair criticism of that book. Have you read the book?
Yeah, of course. Everyone's read the book.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, there was.
Have you?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were about to say you didn't. After
No,
I said
no.
everyone's read the book.
I read the book, and I can't remember if I read the second one too, or if I saw the movie. I don't know. I know the second story, and I think there's a third one, and I didn't get that far. But that's a fair, I think,
Yeah.
criticism of that book. And just like how there are abusive people that manage to enter the kink community, there are people in the kink community that also are going to have abuse in their history too. It doesn't necessarily mean that's a reason for why they are there, but people are people. Apparently that's the phrase of the night.
People are people.
People are people in every community and have all walks of life and different experiences that they bring with them and are capable of harming people. So yeah, just want to say that. So, but it's interesting. I don't remember that in the book though. I don't remember Christian Gray's history with abuse.
I don't know if that was in the first one, but
it sounds vaguely familiar.
My understanding, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, is he had an abusive past with a female dominant.
Oh, that does sound vaguely familiar. I don't know if they really get into details or if they just sort of reference it. Anyway.
I'm not sure, but those are the criticisms.
This is not a book club.
I think it's great that it brought BDSM more into light, but unfortunately, maybe should have done it in a better, more accurate way.
Yeah, like where's the? Well, I'm sure they exist, but I would love to know where the like more accurate, ethical, kink BDSM books are.
Yeah,
that maybe are not like exploiting fiction. exploiting a young person who doesn't really know what she's getting into, like in 50 Shades of Grey.
That's a good question. I heard Cuffed, Tied, and Satisfied is a book that's recommended for people who are wanting to potentially explore BDSM, like whether with a partner or someone else. So that might be something. I haven't read it yet, but I did order it.
Cuffed, Tied, and Satisfied. I will add that to our description box at a later date. Try to include everything I could ahead of time. That's the tricky thing about live streams, but I'm sure people will find this later. Yeah.
Should we be linking 50 Shades of Grey?
We can link 50 Shades of... Should we? I don't know. I mean, it's sort of like a what not to do.
I feel like we shouldn't because it's like, yeah, exactly. Not.
I mean, it's in our description title, like our intro. Yeah. So if people were maybe looking for it, they might stumble upon us, but...
Okay, so we were talking about bondage. Bondage is in the normative space. I think sensation play, sex toys, right, with the vibration, ice cubes, wax. I feel like that's becoming more popular for sure. Also impact play, which is spanking. There's also flogging, which I think is less popular, but spanking for sure. Impact play. And then role play.
Yeah.
Right? I feel like all of these are becoming more normative, which I think is great.
Yeah.
Right? But those are also maybe baby steps into joining.
Baby steps. You could pick up what Cuffed, Tied, and Satisfied, and maybe try out some of the intro play behaviors and see how that goes.
Yeah.
And of course, talk about it beforehand and after with a partner.
Yep. Yep. So just to highlight some of the benefits that have been shared from the kink community, it helps create friends and a social support system because you're in a community like that. If you're going to Munches or you're engaging with people on FetLife, that feels really nice. People have talked about reclaiming their body, right, because they're setting these negotiations and their boundaries, or they're really finding a way to reconnect with their body through sensations, that kind of thing. People have talked about reduced stress, being in like a flow state. That's kind of the word I was looking for. Have you heard of that before? Of just
I have.
Yeah, that BDSM helps with that. There's personal freedom, self-expression, pleasure, all of that. There's a lot of positive effects reported from the BDSM community.
It sounds like it could be empowering for both, like anyone who identifies as dominant or submissive, because you are so thoroughly consenting and negotiating all of these interactions that you're such a willing participant. It would be empowering. And I would imagine with the heightened sensations that you're experiencing, it really puts you in an embodied state, like such a mindful state that so many people struggle with when they're having sex with a partner. There's so many distracting thoughts and people that just aren't really in their bodies in those experiences, and it really gets in the way of experiencing pleasure. If you have a very intense physical sensation being inflicted upon your body, even if it's something like ice or wax or, not necessarily even hurting, but just intense, that really brings your attention into your body. And I would imagine that's part of why people participating in these behaviors find this so pleasurable, because they're just so fully embodied in these experiences. I mean, I don't want to make assumptions for everybody out there, but I would imagine that's part of what draws some people to these experiences.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot that draws people to this, a lot of varying factors.
Well, if the misconception is people enter the kink community and BDSM because of abuse, what are there legitimate reasons for, beyond what we're just talking about, why people would pursue kink?
Beyond what we're talking about?
This is a long pause. Beyond like heightened sensation and embodiment, feeling empowered. Like, is there like research that suggests like this is the benefit or the psychological benefit or a reason why certain people might be drawn to this community?
So there is research that has found that it does reduce stress and activity in the prefrontal cortex during a scene. So it's validating what people are saying about like a flow state and having that just like floaty kind of feeling and not thinking too much, and just feeling and increasing oxytocin and connection. Those have been found as well, absolutely.
Okay. So basically what I just said, so I'm correct.
You're correct.
I just wanted to make sure I was right.
I think I was a little confused on what you were asking, so I was like,
I was probably confused about what I was asking too. It's fine.
Okay. All right. So I want to leave people with questions. So it's really twofold. If you're new to the community, I want to know, or new to this topic, I want to know what questions you still have. And then I want to know, if you're not new, what is your best piece of advice for someone new?
Ooh, so what questions you have if you're interested or curious, and if you are in the kink community, do you have advice for newbies?
Yes.
Like what you wish you knew maybe before you pursued the kink community. I would love to know that. And I think that it's good to seek information from the source or from the community directly. Like we said earlier on, we're not experts in BDSM or kink. We're just here to kind of give some basic information. But there are individuals, there's even somebody we discovered here on YouTube who does a live stream. Evie, I think is her name.
Yeah, Evie Lupine.
Evie Lupine, who is a member of the community herself and has a live stream and answers questions. And so I would imagine she would have a unique perspective to offer compared to, to sex therapists kind of giving some basics around this. So it's good to just keep exploring and read some books and check out some other resources. But we'd love to get a conversation going, like maybe in the comments after our live stream wraps up. Yeah.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you, Holly. Thank you for anyone watching, and we will be back. Check out our other videos.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Soprano. And we will be back with a video next week. I'm not sure if it will be a live stream. Keep an eye out if you're interested for our live streams. As of right now, they are on Wednesdays at 8:30. But we might be kind of doing every other week and then maybe a recorded video on the off week. So just stay tuned. We'll post if we're going to be planning to go live, so you'll know ahead of time.
Sounds good.
All right, everybody. Have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Okay.
Now comes for the tech difficulties.
Did I stop? Like,